Ever wonder why the most successful guy you know refuses to settle down? The real reason will shock you. You see him at the party, sharp, grounded, that calm confidence that doesn't scream for attention, but somehow commands the entire room. He's got the career, the body, the charisma. Everything checks out, except for one puzzling detail. He's deliberately single, and everyone's trying to figure out why. People whisper behind his back, something must be wrong with him. He's got commitment issues, emotionally damaged, too picky, secretly broken inside. Society has conditioned us to see a successful single man as incomplete. We search for the flaw that explains his solitude. But what if that entire narrative is backwards? What if the reason he stays single has nothing to do with running from love and everything to do with protecting something far more valuable? His peace, his focus, his purpose, his sanity in a world obsessed with constant connection and endless relationships. Men who deliberately step back are profoundly misunderstood. They're not vanishing from love out of fear or apathy. They're walking away from the absolute chaos that modern dating and relationships have become. This isn't a story about men who threw in the towel on love. It's about men who finally stopped handing over the keys to their happiness to someone else. Men who realized their worth doesn't come from being chosen. It comes from choosing themselves first today. We're diving deep into the psychology that most women completely miss when it comes to men who choose solitude. Not from weakness or cowardice, but from genuine strength, brutal self-awareness, and honest self-preservation. We're going to explore the damaging myth of the broken man, the devastating psychological toll that constant rejection takes on male identity, the absolute minefield that modern dating has become, the powerful sanctuary that solitude provides, and the quiet rebellion that single men represent in a culture that simply doesn't know what to do with a man who's found peace. So buckle up. This is going to challenge everything you thought you knew. The myth of the broken man. He's not a project waiting to be fixed. Before we dive into the real reasons, we need to completely destroy a deeply outdated and frankly insulting idea. For generations, society sold us one simple story. A man's success was measured by exactly two things: his professional accomplishments and his ability to find a partner and start a family. A single man, especially one past a certain age, was treated like some kind of social anomaly, something unusual that needed explaining. If he wasn't coupled up by 30 people, immediately assumed something had to be fundamentally wrong with him. The labels came fast and vicious: player, emotionally stunted, socially awkward, quietly damaged goods. These stereotypes were convenient shortcuts. They allowed people to explain away his choices without actually bothering to understand them, without asking real questions, without considering that maybe, just maybe, he's making an intentional choice based on clear-headed logic. But convenience often comes at the brutal cost of accuracy. And today, these tired assumptions aren't just outdated, they're completely wrong. The modern single man isn't some side character in a romantic comedy, waiting for the right quirky woman to swoop in and magically fix him. He isn't incomplete. He isn't a broken project desperately needing female intervention. He's not sitting around waiting to be healed, rescued, or completely remolded into someone else's vision. That narrative is dead. What we're actually witnessing is a massive cultural shift. What looks like a handful of men making strange or selfish decisions is actually a widespread recalibration in how men are evaluating relationships, life purpose, and inner peace. Increasingly, men are deliberately opting out of the modern dating cycle, not out of bitterness or apathy, but out of crystal clear intention. For these men, being single isn't some temporary placeholder stage while they figure things out. It's an active, deeply thoughtful choice they're making every single day. The fundamental misunderstanding comes from assuming that a single man must be running away from something, running from love, running from responsibility, running from vulnerability and emotional connection. But many of these men are thinking the complete opposite. They finally solved their problem. The problem was never a lack of love in their lives. It was the lack of genuine stability. It was the constant emotional turbulence, the ever-shifting expectations that changed based on mood or social media trends, the exhausting sense of competing in a relationship game where the rules seemed to change every single week, where what was romantic yesterday is controlling today, where being strong is attractive until suddenly it's toxic masculinity, where opening up emotionally is encouraged until the moment it makes you seem weak. Imagine a man who has spent years genuinely improving himself, climbing the corporate ladder, or building his own business from nothing, working out consistently and taking care of his physical health, improving his habits and routines, reading books, going to therapy, doing the deep emotional work that everyone says men should do. And then he enters relationships that demand that exact same level of energy, commitment, and emotional investment. But those relationships offer absolutely zero respect in return. They offer drama. They offer chaos. They offer constantly moving goalposts. He starts to realize something profound. The friction he's experiencing isn't actually between him and love itself. The friction is between him and the deeply unstable culture that surrounds modern dating and relationships. For many men, choosing to be single isn't a retreat from life or relationships. It's actually a victory lap. It marks the exact moment they stopped seeking a woman to be their source of peace and finally started creating that peace themselves. From within, they're not running from love. They're running toward purpose, toward daily routines and rituals that genuinely ground them. The morning coffee enjoyed in complete silence, the workout where they push their limits, the book they read at night that expands their mind. These aren't sad replacements for romantic love. They're the necessary foundation required to eventually offer love on their own terms, without resentment, without losing themselves in the process. Reason number 1. The devastating cost of rejection. Building a psychological shield. While nobody particularly enjoys being rejected, for many men, rejection hits completely differently, deeper, sharper, closer to the absolute core of their identity and self-worth. In today's brutal dating landscape, rejection has become one of the biggest psychological barriers that men face on a daily basis. Research and social commentary repeatedly highlight the fear of rejection as one of the top reasons men completely withdraw from dating or avoid pursuing romantic connections altogether. This isn't just about the temporary sting of hearing the word no. It's something far more personal and cuts much deeper. For many men, rejection isn't simply an isolated event that happened. It's a verdict a judgment on their entire worth as a human being. It confirms what they secretly fear about themselves in their darkest moments. That they aren't attractive enough, not successful enough, not interesting enough, not funny enough, or simply not good enough, period. In the eyes of women they admire and desire, each rejection, whether it's a casual left swipe on a dating app, a dry one-word response to a thoughtful message, or a sudden ice-cold shoulder after what seemed like a great conversation, isn't just a failed attempt at human connection. It's a visible crack forming in their core identity. Imagine a man's self-esteem and confidence as a solid foundation, a structure built over years. One rejection is a tiny hairline fracture, relatively harmless on its own, easy to brush off and move past, but over years of continuous attempts, hundreds or even thousands of rejections, those seemingly small fractures begin to expand outward. They reach deeper into the structure. They compromise the entire foundation. Eventually, he begins to feel genuinely unstable in his own sense of personal worth. The psychological cost of continuously putting himself out there, being vulnerable, and getting repeatedly shut down becomes absolutely enormous. This is precisely where a psychological shield begins to form, a protective barrier. A man who has experienced repeated rejection over months and years doesn't simply grow discouraged and sad. He evolves. He adapts to survive. He strategically constructs a protective barrier around his emotional world. What many women interpret as frustrating emotional unavailability is often actually emotional intelligence in action. A man who's learning how to protect the most vulnerable parts of himself from further damage. Psychologists have a clinical term for this. They call it avoidant coping. But that sterile term doesn't remotely do it justice. It makes it sound pathological when it's actually rational. This isn't avoidance purely for the sake of retreat or giving up. It's avoidance specifically designed to preserve dignity, to preserve sanity, to preserve a fragile sense of self-worth that has already taken far too many devastating blows. And modern dating, especially the online variety, intensifies this psychological pain exponentially. Dating apps are specifically designed to reward superficial qualities and amplify brutal competition. They leave average-looking men feeling completely invisible, like they don't even exist. He sends dozens of carefully crafted messages and receives only deafening silence. He watches as his profile gets scrolled past endlessly without a second glance. It's not just standard rejection anymore. It's complete erasure. It feels like shouting desperately into an infinite void and hearing absolutely nothing echo back, not even acknowledgement of his existence. So he eventually makes what feels like a perfectly logical decision based on available evidence. He consciously chooses peace over endless possibility, predictability over constant pain, stability over the exhausting emotional roulette wheel that dating has become. He deliberately steps back, not because he's emotionally closed off or damaged, but because he's finally learned, often through brutal experience, to guard his emotional security like the precious resource it actually is. What looks like frustrating distance to outside observers is, in his reality, simple self-respect, self-preservation, survival. Reason number 2. The modern dating minefield. A game that's no longer worth playing. If the fear of rejection represents the psychological wall. Then modern dating itself is the hostile, war-torn terrain that makes building that protective wall absolutely necessary for survival. Many men who actively choose to stay single aren't doing so out of anger, resentment, or bitter misogyny. They're deliberately stepping back because, after carefully observing the current dating environment for months or years, they've reached one simple, rational conclusion. The game is no longer worth the massive emotional cost of playing it. What used to be an exciting journey toward genuine companionship and partnership has devolved into a confusing, contradictory maze where every single step forward feels like a potential catastrophic misstep. One of the biggest and most frustrating friction points is the constant clash of expectations around traditional gender roles versus modern progressive values. Men are constantly encouraged by culture, media, and women themselves to be more emotionally open, more communicative about feelings, more vulnerable and authentic. Yet, when they finally try to embody these modern ideals everyone claims to want, they often find themselves being judged by the exact same old traditional standards where vulnerability in men is still fundamentally perceived as weakness and lack of masculinity. So, they're actively pushed to open up emotionally, but then immediately punished when they actually do. It's a psychological trap with no clear exit. Even basic courtship rituals and dating etiquette have become absolutely confusing and contradictory. A man who was raised to believe that simple gestures, like holding the door open for a woman or offering to pay for dinner, are signs of respect and care, may suddenly find those exact same gestures reframed as patronizing, controlling, or evidence of sexist attitudes. From his genuine perspective, he's simply trying to show basic kindness and interest, but he's repeatedly told by different women and contradictory social messages that his kindness is outdated, offensive, or evidence of problematic thinking. It creates an impossible no-win scenario that's exhausting to navigate. Act in traditionally masculine ways and risk being labeled a misogynist who doesn't respect women's independence. Act in more modern, progressive ways and risk being seen as unconfident, unassertive, or not really interested. Modern dating becomes this bizarre landscape where what's considered the right move changes dramatically depending on which specific woman you're dealing with, what mood she's in, what she read on social media that morning, and what her particular dating history has been. There's also a major fundamental mismatch in stated intentions versus actual expectations. Many single men are genuinely flexible in their approach. They're open to either a committed, long-term relationship or a more casual connection, depending on natural chemistry and how things develop organically over time. However, a significant number of single women, based on their own statements and behavior, are looking almost exclusively for immediate commitment and a clear path towards serious partnership. So when a man honestly expresses openness to seeing where things naturally go without premature pressure, he's instantly labeled a time waster, a player, or someone who's not serious about relationships. But from his honest perspective, he's simply being authentic and letting a potential connection evolve naturally and organically, rather than treating every first date like a high-pressure job interview or compatibility inspection, with marriage as the predetermined outcome. Added to all this are the genuinely frightening horror stories that men hear from friends or witness firsthand. Friends who lost their homes in divorces, entire life savings wiped out by legal proceedings, losing meaningful access to their own children after breakups, having their reputations destroyed by bitter ex-partners. While these extreme cases obviously don't represent every single relationship or breakup, they powerfully shape perception and create fear. They create a quiet but persistent fear that entering any serious relationship is essentially entering a high-stakes gamble where he has far more to lose than to gain, where the potential downside massively outweighs any upside. All of this together leads to what researchers are calling relational burnout. Dating starts to genuinely feel like taking on a second, demanding, unpaid job. One with constantly shifting rules that nobody explains clearly, sky-high expectations that keep increasing, constant judgment and evaluation, and almost zero emotional safety or appreciation for effort. So he makes what seems like the only logical path forward given the circumstances. Not avoidance of women as human beings, not hatred or resentment toward the opposite sex, but strategic avoidance of completely unnecessary chaos, drama, and emotional instability. He consciously chooses to invest his finite time and energy into what actually feels stable, rewarding, clear, and under his control. His professional goals and career growth, his physical health and fitness, his genuine friendships and family relationships, his hard-won inner peace and mental clarity. Reason number 3, the sanctuary of self. Prioritizing genuine peace and clear purpose. Society often views the deliberately single man as someone who's obviously missing a vital piece of what makes life complete. But in his own mind and lived experience, he's not missing a single thing. He's actually gaining something far more valuable than a relationship could provide. What if he's not running away from commitment at all, but running directly toward something entirely different? For a rapidly growing number of men consciously choosing long-term singledom, that something is a powerful combination of inner peace, clear life purpose, and genuine personal freedom. This is perhaps the most profoundly misunderstood aspect of the modern single man's entire mindset. His choice to remain unattached isn't a passive fallback plan because he can't find someone. It isn't a temporary waiting room until the right person finally shows up. It's an active, intentional pursuit of a specific kind of life. He has fundamentally shifted his life's primary priority from the culturally expected goal of finding a romantic partner to the personally meaningful goal of building a world and daily existence that feels genuinely meaningful, authentic, and completely self-directed. This is a man who sees his entire life as a focused mission with clear objectives. Whether that personal mission happens to be building a successful business from the ground up, mastering a difficult craft or skill that takes years to develop, dramatically improving his physical health and athletic performance, or pursuing a specific personal dream that requires total dedication. He has developed a strong internal why that guides his daily decisions and actions. And he deeply understands from experience that a romantic relationship, especially a serious, committed one, could very easily pull him completely off that carefully planned path, derail his progress, dilute his focus. He clearly understands that his time and energy are genuinely limited resources, finite, non-renewable, from his calculated perspective. A romantic relationship requires an absolutely massive investment of both. The late-night emotional conversations that stretch for hours. The constant emotional support and reassurance that's expected. The endless negotiation of different needs, wants, and expectations. The necessary sacrifices and compromises that relationships demand. When he honestly weighs that massive required investment against the tangible progress he could be making toward his most important personal goals during that same time, he often reaches a clear conclusion. Remaining single gives him the precious freedom, focused energy he genuinely needs to build the specific life he's envisioning for himself. This deliberate choice isn't selfish narcissism or emotional immaturity. It's authentic self-direction. It's a man recognizing and accepting that his inner peace and mental clarity genuinely matter and deserve protection. The completely natural ups and downs, conflicts and reconciliations that come with even healthy relationships can disrupt that hard-won clarity. Modern relationships often introduce significant emotional noise into daily life, unnecessary drama, constant negotiation and compromise. He isn't actually avoiding love as a concept or emotion. He's consciously avoiding the specific version of love that destabilizes his carefully constructed internal world, that pulls him away from his center. What looks like lonely isolation to concerned outside observers is actually deeply intentional silence and solitude, a sacred space where he can clearly hear his own authentic thoughts without external interference, judgment, or pressure. There's also an intelligent strategic layer to this decision. Men instinctively know and understand that they are significantly more attractive to potential partners when they're already established in life, genuinely confident in themselves, and deeply grounded in their identity and purpose. Many have fully internalized the powerful idea that love and relationships come far easier and more naturally when they are already operating as the absolute best version of themselves. So they consciously step away from active dating and relationships, not to permanently avoid intimacy and connection, but to properly prepare themselves for eventual intimacy on their terms. They're deliberately playing the long game, while others chase short-term validation. And then there's the simple but profound factor of personal freedom. The ability to completely control his own life, schedule, and decisions. To work late into the night on passion projects without needing to explain or justify himself to anyone. To spend his money however he chooses without compromise or judgment. To pursue hobbies and interests without having to negotiate or sacrifice them. To enjoy quiet evenings in complete solitude without any emotional negotiation or management. He has carefully built a personal sanctuary, not to hide from love or human connection, but to protect the inner peace that he worked incredibly hard over many years to create and maintain. And until someone special can walk into that carefully constructed sanctuary without disturbing it, without demanding he dismantle it, without trying to change its fundamental structure, he remains perfectly content, walking through life alone. No apologies. No explanations needed. Reason number 4. The Great Well-Being Divide. How men and women experience singlehood completely differently. One of the biggest, yet least publicly discussed divides between men and women in modern society is the dramatically different way experience, and process being single. Women often genuinely struggle to understand the mindset and decision-making of a deliberately single man because psychologically and emotionally they're living in an entirely different landscape. And the research data highlighting this massive difference is surprisingly clear and consistent. It reveals what many researchers have started calling the great well-being divide between single men and single women. Recent comprehensive studies consistently show that single women, on average, experience far higher levels of overall life satisfaction compared to single men in the same age groups. They report being significantly happier with their current relationship status, more sexually satisfied whether partnered or not, and far less eager or desperate to find a romantic partner. In almost every measured category of psychological well-being and life satisfaction, single women are objectively thriving more than their male counterparts. Let that genuinely sink in for a moment. The tired old stereotype of the lonely, miserable, desperate single woman waiting for a man to complete her life is completely outdated and contradicted by modern data. Today, the statistically lonelier and less satisfied demographic is actually single men. This finding flips an old cultural script entirely on its head. For many modern women, especially those with strong careers and social networks, singlehood can be genuinely empowering, a time for impressive personal growth, complete independence, and deep, meaningful friendships. But for many men, the lived experience of long-term singlehood is far more psychologically taxing and emotionally difficult. Why is this gap so dramatically wide? One major research-backed reason lies in fundamental differences in social support systems and emotional connections outside romantic relationships. Women tend to naturally cultivate stronger, more emotionally intimate friendships throughout their lives. They talk openly and vulnerably with friends about struggles, fears, and insecurities. They actively lean on each other during difficult times. They maintain deep, meaningful connections and support systems entirely outside of romantic relationships. Men, on the other hand, often rely extremely heavily on their romantic partners for the vast majority of their emotional grounding and support. One widely cited study found a striking pattern. While women will naturally turn to friends, family members, or support groups during emotional struggles and life challenges, a surprisingly large percentage of men rely almost solely on a spouse or romantic partner for that crucial emotional support and processing. Remove that partner from the equation, and the man is often left completely emotionally stranded, isolated, with nowhere to turn and no one to talk to about what he's experiencing. This helps explain why some sobering studies show that roughly 15% of men report having literally zero close friends they can confide in, zero genuine emotional connections outside of romantic relationships. This massive well-being difference between single men and women leads to a painful and frustrating misunderstanding in how they perceive each other. A woman who is genuinely fulfilled, happy, and thriving in her single life may unconsciously assume a man must feel that same sense of freedom, relief, and joy. She may not realize or fully understand that, for him, long-term singlehood often comes with crushing loneliness, social isolation, and a persistent sense of drifting through life without anchor or purpose. Feelings and experiences she may never personally experience to anywhere near the same devastating extent. So why do so many men still actively choose singlehood despite facing this loneliness and lower well-being? Because for them, after careful evaluation of their options, the intense emotional pain of actively pursuing modern relationships, dealing with constant rejection, harsh judgment, confusing mixed signals, and relationship instability genuinely outweighs the pain of simply being alone. It's not an easy or happy choice. It's consciously choosing the lesser of two genuinely difficult and painful paths. And when a woman observes a man who has made this choice, she may not fully realize the depth of what he's actually experiencing. He isn't choosing solitude because he naturally prefers it or thrives in it. He's choosing the version of life that, all things considered, hurts him less. That feels more manageable, more survivable. Reason number 5. The crushing weight of misperception. Escaping damaging negative stereotypes. There is one final powerful reason why many men deliberately step back from the dating world entirely. The absolutely crushing weight of modern social misperception and unfair stereotyping. Today, the way mainstream society and media talk about and portray single men has grown increasingly harsh, suspicious, and outright hostile. While single women have largely freed themselves from outdated insulting labels like spinster or cat lady, and are now often actively celebrated in media as independent, empowered, and living their best lives, single men have absorbed an entirely new catalog of deeply damaging stereotypes and assumptions. Research into cultural perceptions and media portrayals shows that the labels commonly attached to single men are uniquely severe and threatening. In focus groups and social studies, participants frequently and almost automatically associate single men, especially those over 30, with threatening terms like incel, misogynist, creep, or socially unstable loner. These aren't mild insults or gentle teasing. They're serious accusations suggesting danger, hostility, or hidden dysfunction. And they create an enormous psychological burden for men who are simply living quiet, independent lives. These harsh assumptions are wildly unfair to the vast majority of single men who are simply quiet, introspective, introverted, or genuinely content in their independence. But fairness doesn't erase real-world social consequences. A man who chooses solitude, especially if he happens to be naturally introverted or reserved in personality, lives with constant awareness that his chosen lifestyle may be completely misread as suspicious, threatening, or evidence of problems. He knows his desire for privacy can be interpreted as secrecy or something to hide. His hard-won independence mistaken for emotional brokenness or inability to connect. This dynamic creates a vicious psychological cycle that's difficult to escape. A man may initially withdraw from dating and social settings because he feels anxious, unfairly judged, or emotionally burnt out from negative experiences. That withdrawal then makes him appear even more isolated to outside observers, which leads others to view him with greater suspicion and concern, which confirms his original fear that he's being fundamentally misunderstood. He becomes trapped in a self-reinforcing loop where avoiding judgment, ironically, invites even more judgment and scrutiny. The modern dating environment magnifies this tension exponentially. Men often feel like they're being constantly screened and evaluated, not primarily for compatibility or shared values, but specifically for hidden red flags and warning signs of danger. And while heightened vigilance about safety is absolutely necessary and understandable given real dangers women face, the unintended side effect is that ordinary, decent, harmless men feel like they are presumed guilty until proven innocent, treated as potential threats by default. The fear of being misinterpreted, judged too quickly based on stereotypes, or labeled unfairly based on worst-case assumptions, becomes a powerful deterrent to even trying. For many men, stepping away from dating entirely is not a rejection of women as people. It's a rejection of this constant microscope, this presumption of guilt, this exhausting need to constantly prove he's not dangerous or damaged. In chosen solitude, he is no longer viewed as a potential threat. He's no longer being constantly evaluated and judged. He's simply himself, living quietly, without accusation or suspicion. So he makes a conscious choice. He chooses the quiet dignity of self-preservation over a world that feels quick to misread him. What may appear to others as antisocial or problematic behavior is, from his perspective, an act of radical self-respect, a refusal to let society define him through harmful stereotypes rather than truth. We've explored the deeply misunderstood psychology of men who consciously choose long-term singleness, from protective emotional shields to cultural exhaustion, from crushing rejection to hard-won peace, from unfair misperception to clear purpose. This isn't about blame or taking sides. It's about genuine empathy and understanding. It's not men versus women. It's understanding versus assumption. So, if you're one of those men living this experience, drop your story in the comments. What made you finally stop chasing relationships? What peace did you discover when you let go? And if you're a woman watching, what part of this shifted your perspective? Did any of this help you see that singleness isn't always a wound? Sometimes it's a sanctuary. Let's start an honest conversation, because only when we truly understand each other can we genuinely connect again. The man who chooses solitude isn't broken. He's not running from love. He's running toward peace. He's not cold. He's calm. He's not lost. He's free. He's learned that his peace is sacred. His time is finite. His soul is not for sale. He's not giving up on love. He's waiting for a version of it that doesn't demand self-destruction as proof of devotion. The rise of the single man by choice isn't a tragedy. It's an awakening, a quiet rebellion against chaos disguised as connection. He's not hiding from the world. He's building his own. And maybe, just maybe, when the world finally learns to meet him there, he'll open the gate again.